James Sunderland has arrived in the town of Silent Hill, Maine, after receiving a letter from his wife Mary, despite the fact that she suffered a chronic disease and died 3 years prior. The letter claims that Mary is waiting for James in their special place, which confuses James, as the whole town of Silent Hill was their special place. Despite James wondering if the letter is a prank by someone with a twisted sense of humor, he notes that the letter is definitely written in Mary's handwriting and the author is aware James once made a promise to return to Silent Hill with Mary and that he never fulfilled this promise. After leaving the town's observation deck and walking to Silent Hill, James enters a graveyard and meets Angela Roscoe, a nervous young woman who came to the town to search for her missing mother. She warns him that there's something wrong with the town and that it could be dangerous, but he ignores her warnings, saying he doesn't care if it's dangerous and that he plans on finding his missing someone too. When James reaches Silent Hill, he discovers that it is not the same beautiful town it was a few years ago. In addition to the bizarre, omnipresent fog, the whole town seems to be rotting away and abandoned. Macabre, vaguely humanoid creatures are roaming the streets and attempting to attack James whenever possible. When he discovers that the path to his first destination, the lakeside Rosewater Park, is blocked, James decides to pass through an apartment complex to reach what he believes could be the special place Mary mentioned in her letter. Inside the apartments, James briefly encounters a little girl, who steps on his hand before running away. Soon after that, he finds Pyramid Head, a humanoid monster whose head is completely obscured by a giant, metal, pyramid-shaped helmet. James later meets a young man, Eddie Dombrowski, who is vomiting into one of the apartment toilets. Eddie defensively responds to questions regarding a corpse in the refrigerator of the apartment room. In another apartment complex, James finds Angela again lying in front of a large mirror, contemplating suicide with a knife in her hand. Trying to talk her out of it, James persuades her to hand him the knife for her own safety, and she flees in an unusual panic to resume her search for her mother. After James leaves the apartment building, he finds the girl he previously met humming to herself on a graffiti-covered wall. He confronts her in frustration, and she reveals to James that she knows Mary and that he never loved her anyway, but then jumps off the other side of the wall before James can get more information from her. When James finally reaches Rosewater Park, he meets a woman named Maria, who appears nearly identical to his recently deceased wife Mary, but showing off more skin and possessing more of an arrogant attitude. During their time together, Maria reveals insight into matters that only he or Mary would know and acts in a very seductive manner toward James. Maria accompanies James in his attempt to reach his second suspected special place, the Lakeview Hotel that he and Mary once stayed at. James enters Pete's Bolorama, where he meets Eddie again. He also spots the little girl, who runs away from James upon seeing him. Eddie then reveals to James that her name is Laura. Outside, Maria claims to have seen Laura and, out of concern for her, has James try to pursue the girl. After passing through Heaven's Night, James and Maria see Laura enter Brookhaven Hospital, so they follow. While exploring the hospital, Maria becomes sick and rests in a hospital room. James finds Laura in one of the rooms, but he becomes angry at her for claiming to have known Mary for the past year, in clear contradiction to his belief that she has been dead for 3 years. Laura responds by locking him in a room filled with covered monsters stuffed in hanging cages under the pretense of looking for a letter from his wife. After they are defeated, the hospital undergoes a sudden dramatic change to the otherworld, where James returns to the hospital room to find Maria missing. James later finds Maria in the hospital's basement. However, Maria becomes incensed, claiming that James had abandoned her and that he doesn't seem to care to see that she's alive after presumably dying. After she calms down, they continue to search for Laura. Pyramid Head appears and chases both James and Maria through the hospital's basement, and the creature manages to slaughter Maria while they attempt to make their escape via an elevator. Alone again and saddened by the loss of Maria, James decides to refocus on his original task of finding Mary. He leaves the hospital and finds a key buried beneath a statue in Rosewater Park, which leads him to the Silent Hill Historical Society. The Historical Society becomes an exploration of 2 levels, Toluca Prison and a labyrinth, in which Pyramid Head resides. In this area, James finds Maria, miraculously alive and locked in a prison cell, who greets him with memories of Mary. Maria claims that they were simply separated in the hospital basement and that she had not been killed. James tells her that he will free her, but upon reaching the other side of the cell, he discovers that she has been mysteriously murdered. From a newspaper article, James discovers that Angela killed her father, who sexually and physically abused her under the complicity of her mother. James saves Angela from a monstrous representation of her father, after which she becomes hostile. Angela expresses her distrust in James and men in general, as from her experience they were only after one thing, sex. She also calls James a liar who didn't want Mary around anymore, before leaving. Near the end of the labyrinth, James finds Eddie, who has mentally snapped after a life of bullying and verbal abuse by his peers due to his physical appearance and him being overweight. Eddie reveals he killed the dog of a bullying football player and then shot the dog's owner in the leg. It becomes clear that Eddie is mentally unwell and is willing to kill the next one to laugh at him. James unwisely asks Eddie if he's gone nuts, prompting a battle between James and Eddie. James kills Eddie in self-defense, and he feels shocked and ashamed of himself to have killed a human. James questions his perception of the events leading to his arrival in the town. As well, the letter that he supposedly received from Mary goes blank, indicating that the letter itself was something that never actually existed. James exits the labyrinth and rows a boat to the Lakeview Hotel in hopes of finding Mary. In the hotel's restaurant, James finds Laura, and she gives him the letter she claimed to be seeking earlier, which reveals that Mary wanted to adopt her while confirming Laura's claims of knowing Mary for the past year. In room 312, James watches a videotape he apparently left at the hotel 3 years ago, which shows that he killed his terminally ill wife by smothering her with a pillow. For a few moments, James silently sits, realizing the truth and facing his own psychological guilt. Laura, ready to leave the town, finds James, and he chooses to reveal the truth to her. Laura is furious at him for killing Mary and screams she hates him, then she exits the room without another word. The radio James has been carrying to warn him of the approach of monsters then sends a message from Mary, asking him to find her. James explores the rest of the hotel, discovering that it is decrepit and rotting and is now nothing more than the remains of a building that has experienced a fire. James then finds Angela on a burning staircase, vacantly standing between two skinned, blood-stained, male corpses stitched to a frame, symbolic of her dead father and brother. Angela asks him to return her knife so that she can end her life, but James does not comply. As Angela ascends the burning staircase, James states that the room is hot as hell, to which she replies, "For me, it's always like this," meaning that her life was always a living hell. Angela disappears beyond the flames, presumably killing herself off-screen. In the hotel lobby, James finds Maria resurrected again, bound and screaming for James's help, but she is immediately killed by two pyramid heads. James then realizes that they have been created to punish him for his sins and proceeds to fight the duo. After they are sufficiently weakened, they impale themselves with their own spears, as if to indicate that their purpose had been fulfilled. James is led to a hallway, where he listens to a previous interaction that Mary and he had while she was still alive. In the situation, James had brought Mary flowers, but she refused them, yelling in exasperation at James, stating that she was too disgusting to deserve flowers. By the end of the conversation, Mary desperately pleads for James to be with her. The memory ends, and James then enters a large metallic complex with a long staircase. At the top of this staircase, on the roof, he finds a woman resembling Mary who transforms into a monster after becoming angered by James. Upon defeating this final demon, the game comes to a close. Ending Silent Hill 2 does not have an explicitly known canonical ending, and this has been a source of debate in the fanbase. A translation of the Book of Lost Memories says, of the 4 conclusions, there is no one correct interpretation. Each ending indicates a different possibility. 1. The writer of Silent Hill 2, Hiroyuki Iwaku, has never made an official statement regarding a canon ending. The final version of the game has a total of 6 possible endings, 3 of which can be achieved on the first playthrough: Leave, In Water, Maria, and 3 others: Rebirth, Dog, UFO, enabled by acquiring new items in replays. The UFO ending doesn't appear in the original PlayStation 2 release, which had a black label, whereas the Greatest Hits version had a red label. 1. Leave. James reaches the hotel rooftop and sees a woman whom he mistakes for his late wife. Yet it is not Mary, but instead a vindictive Maria, who then makes a final attempt to get James to accept her. James rebuffs her, however, and she turns into a monster similar to the hanging monsters in the hospital, becoming the final boss. Upon her defeat, James is granted a final meeting with Mary, who gives him her letter. James then leaves Silent Hill together with Laura. The ending song is Overdose Delusion. 2. In Water. The woman on the rooftop is Maria once again, making a final attempt to get James to accept her. James rebuffs her, however, and she turns into a being similar to the hanging monsters in the hospital, becoming the final boss. Upon her defeat, James is granted a final meeting with Mary. She tells James that he has suffered enough for killing her and gives him the letter. Mary violently coughs and dies again as James holds her hand. According to the novelization, Mary's corpse was already in the trunk of James's car. He takes out her body and arranges it in the passenger seat. Masahiro Ito and Gai Jihi state that she was actually in the backseat, rather than the trunk. 11. James arrives at the conclusion that he is unable to live without Mary, realizing that he came to Silent Hill to commit suicide in a place of memories. James then drowns himself by driving into Toluca Lake with his wife's corpse so they can be together in death. A view from under the lake with bubbles rising to the surface is seen. The ending song is Angels Thanatos. 3. Maria. If the player spends a lot of time with Maria and protects her well from monsters, including from Pyramid Head in the hospital basement, the woman in the final boss room will identify as Mary, who has not forgiven James for killing her. She will then turn into the final boss, and after her defeat, James returns to Rosewater Park to stare at the water. Maria, inexplicably resurrected again, asks James if he killed Mary again. James says that wasn't Mary, implying he believes she was just a hallucination or manifestation. James leaves town with Maria. As they leave, however, Maria starts coughing, implying she is suffering from the same illness as Mary. The ending song is Promise. 4. Rebirth. James kills Maria. He then rows a boat with his wife's corpse to the Church of the Rebirth on Toluca Lake Island to use new objects collected in the game to resurrect Mary by confronting the old gods of Silent Hill, with an unknown result. The ending song is The Reverse Will. 5. Dog. In the hotel, James discovers a dog, who has apparently been controlling all the events of the game from a large, cartoony computer console, beyond a locked door. In disbelief, James exclaims, "So it was all your work," in Japanese, and the dog licks him. A silly montage plays. 6. UFO. This ending is a continuation of the UFO ending of the first game added in the re-released version, in which James is abducted by a group of aliens with the help of the first game's protagonist, Harry Mason. Prior to James's arrival in the town, Maria wakes up alone and frightened in Heaven's Night. After pondering to herself about what she should do, she eventually decides to try and find someone else in the town. She begins to wander through the streets of Silent Hill until she eventually enters the Baldwin Mansion, an area out of bounds in the main game. Here she meets the owner of the mansion, Ernest Baldwin. Although she never actually sees him, all their conversations are shared between locked doors. Ernest speaks in a strange monotone and asks her to find the white liquid, previously mentioned white chrism, to help him bring back his dead daughter Amy. Maria helps him with this, even though it may not work, stating, "I don't mind fighting for an impossible cause." During Maria's exploration of the mansion, she finds a teddy bear in Amy's room. Maria comments that Laura would love it, showing that she shares some of Mary's memories. After Maria retrieves the white liquid, to Ernest, he reveals slightly more, telling her about a man named James Sunderland. He warns Maria that James is a bad man and that he's looking for the you that isn't you. This seems to stir something in Maria, who begins to remember things about James, that he wasn't good to his wife while she was ill and that he killed her, but she also recalls that underneath, James is a kind person. Maria then opens the door, but the room where Ernest's voice had been coming from is empty, implying that he had been a ghost. Disappointed, Maria leaves the Baldwin mansion and contemplates suicide, holding her revolver against her head, but refrains and tosses it over a wall. She decides to follow her fate and walks to Rosewater Park, hoping that James will accept her.